Welcome to the Configure Price Quote podcast. My name is Sohn and I'm the founder of CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. Hello everyone, it's a new year and it's the first solo episode. Alright, before we jump in a little context. As the beginning of the year, in my experience, this is one of the most common times when companies start seriously looking at CPQ and broader revenue management solutions. Budgets are typically finalized, revenue targets are set, and priorities get reshuffled, and suddenly a lot of organizations say, okay, this is the year we finally need CPQ, or we really need to replace what we already have. So if you're listening right now and you're in evaluation mode, you're definitely not alone. Let me ask you something. If you're currently looking for a CPQ solution or think about replacing one, does this sound familiar? You start researching and within a few days you feel more confused than you were when you started. You read analyst evaluations, you check review sites, you talk to a consulting partner, you Google best CPQ software or something similar. You end up on Reddit reading feedback from others, and you now can also ask ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude and get some answers in seconds, right? And at some point you probably think there's no way all of this can be true at the same time. The irony here is that there has never been more CPQ information available than today, and that's exactly what makes the decision feel overwhelming. So the real question isn't where to find information. The real question is, how is a customer supposed to make a good decision with all of this input? That's what I want to unpack today. So let's start there. So most CPQ buyers are not under-informed, they are overloaded. And that's not because they are inexperienced or careless, it's because the market is very noisy. So there are large analyst firms, smaller advisory firms and research firms, review platform, consulting partners, vendor webinars, white papers, blog posts and customer stories, and even more. Every one of these sources can be useful, but every one of them comes also with some context and perspective, even when people try to be objective, and that applies for us as well, right? So when you add all of that together, you don't get clarity, you get noise. And when people feel overloaded, they usually don't make better decisions, they make faster ones. They narrow down too early. They basically inherit the shortlist. They hope the demo will magically connect the dots. And in my experience, that's often where CPQ projects start heading in the wrong direction. This is also why it helps to consciously separate learning from comparing. Early in the search, what most teams actually need is structured, vendor-neutral understanding of the landscape before they narrow too fast. That's exactly the stage where something like the CPQ briefing subscription is helpful, because it's designed to provide context early before demos and shortlists start driving the conversation. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? And that, yes, there are well over 135 CPQ solutions available globally. That's not the sign that the market is broken. It's a sign that CPQ is not one problem, right? So different companies sell in fundamentally different ways. Some sell high volume commercial products, others sell engineered solutions with complex dependencies. Some are CRM centric and want quoting tightly embedded in the sales workflow, and others are ERP centric and care more about downstream order accuracy and financial processing. Some sell one-time products, others sell subscriptions. They could be usage-based, bundled, or combinations of all of that. And over time, CPQ vendors evolved to serve all these different realities, right? That's why two vendors can both say we do CPQ and still be built for very different selling motions, for very different customers. And this is where buyers get tripped up, right? So because the differences are often architectural and operational and not just on a feature level. And that leads to an important clarification that's especially relevant for first-time CPQ buyers. As you know, I hope at least CPQ stands for Configure Price Quote, right? So, and at the high level, CPQ helps define what's being sold. You apply the pricing and discount rules, you manage approvals, and produce a quote that a customer can accept or reject. For many organizations, that alone is a big improvement over manual quoting. But you also hear vendors talk more and more about revenue management, revenue lifecycle management, right? Quote to cash, and so on. And the names vary, but the concept is pretty consistent across vendors, right? So revenue management or revenue lifecycle and so on is broader than CPQ. It covers what happens not only to the quote, but also after the quote becomes a contract and turns into ongoing revenue. That includes contracting also, ordering, billing, renewals, expansions, amendments, and changes over time. A simple way to think about it is this. CPQ is the front end of a revenue motion. And revenue lifecycle management is the end-to-end system around that motion. And that distinction matters because many buyers today are not just choosing a CPQ tool, they're also implicitly deciding how much of the end-to-end revenue lifecycle one platform should own versus what should integrate. With that in mind, here's the core issues most teams underestimate. CPQ often looks like just another sales tool, right? But in practice, it's a system decision. It touches product and packaging logic, pricing and discount governance, approvals, policies, contracts, and in many cases, billing and revenue operations. That's why CPQ projects are rarely just a sales initiative, right? So they cut across many functions very quickly. And we mentioned that before in many meetings, right? So it could be the sales team, product management, IT, finance, marketing, pre-sales, and so on. You hear many folks talk about now a unified data model. So let's keep that simple. A unified data model means that products, prices, subscription, entitlements, contractual terms are built on the same underlying structure instead of many different potentially disconnected systems. When that foundation is unified, fewer things get interpreted differently, right? So fewer manual corrections are needed and there's less revenue leakage. Now, let's connect that to AI without all the hype around that, right? So, but AI can only reason reliably if the data and logic underneath it are consistent. If product data lives in one place, pricing rules live somewhere else, subscription terms are tracked in another systems, and amendments are partly manual, AI doesn't become intelligent. It becomes confidently wrong. And in revenue process, confidently wrong is dangerous because errors scale fast, right? So that's why unified data model isn't just a technical detail, it's foundational for any credible AI-assisted selling, pricing guidance, or automation story. AI doesn't fix weak foundations, it amplifies them. So this becomes even more critical when you move from one-time selling to subscriptions and consumption-based pricing. In a one-time selling model, accuracy matters primarily at the moment when you sell, right? So your quote converts to an order, an invoice, and you're done. In subscription and usage models, accuracy has to hold up over time. Quotes turn into contracts, contracts change, customers upgrade, downgrade, co-term subscription, and pricing evolves. So in that world, CPQ mistakes don't stop when the deal closes, right? So they compound into billing errors, customer disputes, revenue leakage, and operational friction. That's why CPQ decisions today are often inseparable from billing and lifecycle considerations, especially for software and technology companies, but some others as well. So given all of this, it's completely irrational that buyers don't evaluate all of the 135 different tools that are out there, right? So most teams narrow it down to maybe 5 to 8. Shortlists are necessary. The problem isn't that shortlists exist, it's how early they are formed and why. Many shortlists, from my perspective, are inherited. They come from an existing CRM or ERP decision, a partner preference, a ranking that looked very good, a peer recommendation, right? So that made sense potentially in different contexts. That doesn't mean the shortlist is wrong, but it might be incomplete. A better early filter usually isn't a feature checklist, right? It's understanding your selling motion and commercial model. It's asking how you sell today and how that's changing, how often price and product rules change, who owns commercial logic after go live, and how tightly CPQ needs to align with contracts and billing. It's also asking whether you're choosing a CPQ as a standalone capability or effectively choosing a broader revenue lifecycle approach. If those questions are answered early, the shortlist becomes smarter and the demos become more meaningful. If not, demos can turn into a time waster and theater, and decisions really become guesswork. So how do you make a good CPQ decision then when there's so much information out there? First, I suggest accept that confusion is normal. CPQ sits at the intersection of how you sell, how you price, how you contract, and how you manage revenue over time. It is simply not a simple category. Second, separate learning from comparing. Early in the journey, vendor-neutral understanding helps you avoid narrowing too fast. And that's again where the Novo CPQ briefing subscription fits, because it's designed to support that early learning phase. Later, once you're closer to a decision and work with a shortlist, objective comparisons grounded in real buyer considerations matter much more than generic rankings, right? So that's typically where the Novo CPQ sales report is most useful, because it's built for practical side-by-side evaluation prior to a demo, and that's where it's helpful. And finally, remember this. A CPQ decision isn't about finding the perfect product, right? So it's about choosing a commercial and operating model you can live with for years, and a foundation that won't collapse as your business changes, right? So if CPQ feels hard, it's because it forces companies to confront how they actually sell and how they want to manage revenue over time. All right, that's it for today. If you're in the evaluation cycle right now, I hope this helped you feel a little less overwhelmed and a little more in control. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is frank.sohn@novocpq.com. Thank you very much, and I will be back here next week with another guest on the CPQ podcast. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novocpq.com. So long, everyone.